Alright, so player versus player battles is a concept I originally played around with in my head, thinking, oh, what a neat little idea. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized the potential PvP combat in Star Rail could have, as well as how much actual work would need to go into making sure this would play correctly. So let's delve into a potential future where the devs at Hoyoverse bless us with an actual PvP mode, and as to what features it might have, what would need to be changed to the core gameplay, and how to make it as fun as possible for everyone. Because at the end of the day, that's what we play games for. Well, and destroying bosses with your favorite waifus. Let's just jump right into it. Hoyoverse has a history of including multiplayer aspects into their previous gacha games. Both Honkai Impact 3rd and Genshin Impact allow you to play the game in co-op, where you can take on enemy bosses and explore the world with your friends. But weirdly enough, Star Rail has zero semblance of any sort of co-op or multiplayer aspect. The most that we have is your friends being able to give you a support character whenever you're fighting an enemy that uses up your trailblaze power. And to be fair, recently they did update the social aspects in the game by upping the amount of support characters a friend can have from 1 to 3, as well as expanding the amount of information you share on your in-game profile. But it's still nowhere near what Honkai Impact and Genshin have brought to the table in terms of collaborative gameplay. So that begs the question, why when developing the game combining the cumulative knowledge and experience gained from their last two gacha hit titles, did they intentionally exclude any sort of co-op? Well, it's quite simple, because no one would use it. At first that sounds like quite the hot take, and I'm sure many of you would love to fight an epic duel against Cocolia or Phantilia alongside your friend. But the implementation of such a system just wouldn't make a whole lot of sense in a turn-based combat gacha game. Not to mention, co-op game modes in Hoyoverse's other games are hardly utilized. Now, to play devil's advocate, perhaps co-op isn't utilized as much, as Hoyoverse hasn't given players the full ability to do activities together. That's definitely a possibility, but after looking through many different places, the consensus seems to be that most players would rather explore their worlds and finish quests by themselves, and Star Rail would be no different in that regard. But it does have one thing that other Hoyoverse titles don't, that being a combat system that is nearly infinitely modable, making it absolutely perfect for our topic today. So let's get into the actual speculation of what a PvP system in Honkai Star Rail could look like. To begin, if Hoyoverse were to ever implement a PvP system, I believe it would look something very similar to how Genshin has their TCG game mode, extremely non-competitive and vastly separated from the main gameplay. But for our purposes, I'm throwing out entirely how Hoyo would design it, and I'm coming in with what I think would be the best ways to implement it, which would allow for the most amount of players to have as much fun as possible. To really begin, let's look at what in the core gameplay would need to be changed to allow for a fair and balanced system that is still familiar enough to the current combat we have in-game. The first game-changing tweak that I believe would allow for PvP to work is to add weakness break elements to individual characters themselves. Yes, you've heard me correctly. I realized early on in the brainstorming process that characters' weakness break abilities would for the most part go to waste unless their kit has a specific weakness break application without lowering the weakness bar all the way down, like Sampo, Luca, or Welt. But a vast majority of characters would never get to utilize the break effects, which for several character kits, like Himiko, Shuei, and Harmony Trailblazer, are absolutely essential. How would we determine which characters have what weaknesses? Well, that's one of the few things I'm not certain on. I would say it should have a similar process to how Hoyo designs the actual element of a character. There are a few characters we might be able to deduce what weaknesses they'd have, since they already have a boss form that we can fight that has weakness elements, like Kafka or Yanqing. So this could be used as a starting point reference for expanding upon this concept, but ultimately, I'd like to hear what ideas you have for this. Leave them down in the comments below. For the remainder of this video, I will continue to reference Genshin's TCG game mode, as I drew heavy inspiration from the core elements of that mode and translated it into a system that would work for Star Rail. Another issue I had to brainstorm around was the idea of a PvP game mode that could be affected by the gacha and RNG systems within the game. I personally don't believe players would have a positive experience having to rely on pity, artifact sets, and most importantly, money to competitively or even casually compete in a game mode such as this. So to compromise the gacha nature of the game with attempting to have fair and competitive play, I believe making each character have set stats would be ideal, but making it so you need the actual character in-game to utilize them in this mode, working similar to a static TCG card. I believe this has several benefits for the system. Firstly, it would keep some semblance of progression within the game mode, having you work towards a goal, as well as on the flip side, benefiting character pulls, as now not only will you unlock that character to utilize in the overworld, Memory of Chaos, Pure Fiction, and Apocalyptic Shadow, but you will unlock them in the PvP game mode, giving more content to the player. Now, this method isn't perfect, as just like a card game, certain cards or characters, in this case, may be under or overpowered, requiring balancing updates, but I believe Hoyo will stick to how they naturally balance characters in the game by adding new additions to the game mode that will buff or benefit previously underutilized characters. And in a PvP game mode, there's tons of freedom to work around with, so only time will tell with what either the community or developers come up with. Next up, we'll be solving an issue that is inherent to Star Rail itself, and that is the path system. You might have thought about this already, but we naturally only have 4 characters on a team, whereas enemies that we fight can spawn up to a total of 5 on the field. This is beneficial for mostly erudition type characters, but by having only 4 characters on any given team, they are now placed at an inherently unavoidable disadvantage. So how can we remedy this? Add a 5th character slot to our teams? While this would be fun, I think it would break the very nature and balancing of the game, since all of our current character kits, as well as light cones and relics, are designed around having only 4 characters in a team. For the best solution, we'll be pulling some inspiration from Ethereum Wars and adding a 5th unit on our side, introducing the configurable trotter. Normal trotters have variations on their powers. Some can heal allies, provide shields, or even deal damage at set intervals, and I believe a trotter unit could add that needed balance as well as another unique aspect to gameplay that wouldn't be in the normal game. Since every team would have that trotter slot, balancing would be very easy, while also adding tons of possibility with wacky synergies and abilities that the trotter could have. This is also just another aspect that could have progression put into the game mode, as you could add levels or pathways to unlocking different trotter abilities as part of the core progression, which would increase the longevity of this game mode. Alright, so we've tackled weakness breaks, balancing characters, and balancing character paths. What else would we need to tackle to have a fully working PvP mode? Well, making sure it's fun, of course. Correcting the actual balance of character abilities, attacks, and whatnot is crucial to any competitive game mode. Firstly, character damage multipliers will need to be astronomically tuned down. In normal combat, you will commonly see total damage numbers from a single attack in the millions, whereas the max a character's health can currently be, with the highest multipliers, is around 10 to 15,000, even with simulated universe blessings. So toning down damage will be a necessity, as well as ensuring that crowd control debuffs are properly balanced and not overly suffocating, because the last thing you want to do to a player of your game is frustrate them. We can see this from bosses like Svarog or the Abundance Steer, that having your units endlessly not be in control is not a fun gameplay loop. Now that we've gone over most of the necessary changes to the core gameplay, let's speculate about potential features this mode can provide. Just like any other endgame mode in Star Rail, memory turbulences, or basically just modifiers, is something that can also be applied here. I believe the amount modifiers should affect the gameplay should be significantly lessened than in other endgame modes, as all characters would have set stats, but still nonetheless, having a different modifier, say once every 2 weeks, could help freshen up whatever meta permeates in this mode. Tournaments are another obvious addition that would add a lot of legitimacy to a competitive scene in the game, whether they be community or developer held. These sort of events only lead to an increase in investment from the community, as well as satisfaction for those who had already sunk time into the game mode. 2 other small additions I think would be neat is an ability to go into a match blind, being given either a random team of characters to utilize as best you can, or a mirror matchup to your opponent are 2 small subgame modes within this concept that I believe would add tons of content. And finally, yet another idea ripped straight from Genshin's TCG, but having NPC battles against set teams. This could very easily be done, both logistically and thematically. Having NPCs utilize characters from their respective regions would add just that little extra bit of spice. But nothing is without error. There are a few issues that I ran into while brainstorming that I just couldn't quite resolve, so let me know if you guys have any ideas for these problems. The first one would be attack chance. Several character kits revolve around increasing their own or another's chance to be attacked, such as Clara or March 7th. I know Preservation Trailblazer has a taunt ability, which to this day is the only one implemented in game, but it's not exactly a one-to-one. My one idea is that an attack chance could give your enemies a percentage chance to be debuffed with taunt, but I'm sure there are also other ways it could be implemented for a clean experience. Another little hiccup is whether or not to allow auto battle in this mode. I think the best way to handle it would be allowing auto battle to still happen, with players of course knowing optimal play is greatly reduced, but having some portions of the mode fully disable auto battle, such as tournaments or boss NPC battles. Finally, before I leave today's video, here are a few ideas I had regarding this concept that didn't make it to the final product, but I believe still have some potential. First is the addition of having more than 4 characters on a team, but still only having 4 on the field at any one time plus your trotter. So this would work similarly to how Pokemon does their turn-based combat, except in Star Rail's case, once one of your units is killed, it can be replaced by one of your backup units. As for how many units total a player could bring, I'm really not sure, but there's a lot of potential to this idea if done correctly and can make for thrilling 1v1s between players. The other concept was a best 2 out of 3 when dueling, having players build 3 full teams and choosing a different team each battle. I figured at first this would be a great idea, but also having 3 fully optimized teams is quite difficult even when character stats are static, because you'd still need to consider trotter levels and abilities, but those are just a couple of things I've thought of. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a comment and subscribe to the channel. I also have a Discord where you can share your ideas and suggestions not only about this video, but Star Rail in general, directly to me and a community of over 150 others. I absolutely love diving deep into projects like this and will continue to make similar videos in the future. I appreciate all of you for watching. Sir Epic out. See you next time.